The morning I walked across that stage, I scanned the crowd 3 times, row by row, section by section. I told myself I was just looking. I knew I wasn't. They weren't there. And the folder I held in my hand, the one with my degree inside, I had already decided what I was going to do with it. Not that day, not for years, but eventually. But to understand why that empty seat mattered as much as it did, I have to take you back, about 11 years before that graduation morning, to a house in a mid-sized town in central Ohio, where the dining room always smelled faintly of burnt coffee and something that never quite got finished. That smell is important. You'll understand why later. My name for this story is Lena. I was the second of 3 children, the middle one. And if you have ever been the middle one in a family where love was rationed unevenly, you already know everything you need to know about where this story starts. My older brother, Wade, was the firstborn son. In my family, that meant something. It meant everything. My parents, Gerald and Diane, made no particular effort to hide what Wade represented to them. He was the heir to whatever they imagined their legacy to be. His school photos were framed first, his accomplishments announced at dinner without prompting, his failures quietly absorbed and excused. When Wade got a C in calculus, my father said, "That professor must be unreasonable." When I got a B+ in the same class, my mother said, "You'll need to do better than that." I am not telling you this to build a case for myself. I am telling you because it is true, and because you need to understand the specific texture of growing up in a house where you are perpetually almost enough. My younger sister, Priscilla, was the baby, and she occupied that particular position with the kind of ease that made it clear she had never once questioned whether she was wanted. She wasn't cruel to me, not exactly. She simply didn't notice, the way people don't notice furniture. I noticed everything. My grandmother on my mother's side, her name was Iris. She used to watch me at family gatherings with a specific kind of attention I didn't have a name for until I was much older. One afternoon, when I was around 13, she pulled me aside in her kitchen while everyone else was watching football in the other room. She handed me a glass of lemonade. She didn't say much, but what she did say, I kept. She said, "Lena, still waters run deep. Don't let anyone tell you the quiet ones lose." I thought she was being kind. I thought it was the sort of thing grandmothers say to the grandchildren they can see are struggling. I wrote it off as love without information. I was wrong about that, but I wouldn't know how wrong for another decade. What Gerald and Diane did not know, in all the years they were choosing Wade for every opportunity, every investment, every pointed word of praise, was that I was watching exactly how it was done. And I was learning something they never intended to teach me. I studied finance. I chose it deliberately, quietly, and without asking anyone's opinion. My father had spent most of my teenage years telling anyone who would listen that Wade was going into business, that the family's future was in capable hands. He did not mean this as an insult to me. That almost made it worse. I applied to 4 universities. I told no one. I was accepted to 3. I said nothing. I enrolled at the one with the best financial aid package and the strongest placement record for the specific area of accounting and financial planning I had already decided I was going to master. My parents found out when the acceptance letter arrived. My father's response? "That's a bit far from home, isn't it?" My mother's, "I hope you've thought about what happens if this doesn't work out." Wade, at that time, had enrolled in a local business program 20 minutes from the house. My parents attended every single one of his orientation events. 4 years later, I graduated with honors, a 3.91 GPA, a job offer already signed. I sent my parents the invitation the month before.
I sent a second copy 2 weeks out. I called once. My mother said they would try. My father said it was a long drive. Wade had a flag football tournament that weekend. Flag football. I walked across that stage in front of strangers and a few professors who remembered my name, and I held the degree with both hands, and I thought, this is fine. I am fine. And I believed it just enough to get through the afternoon. That evening, I sat in my dorm room, which I had already started packing because the job started in 3 weeks, and I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not the anger, the grief. There is a difference, and it matters. Anger wants something. Grief has already understood that the something isn't coming. The tears came without warning. Not a collapse, just a quiet overflow I let happen, alone, in a room that smelled like cardboard and old carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about Iris, my grandmother, who had died the winter before my final year. I thought about her in that kitchen, handing me the lemonade, watching me with that particular attention. I always thought she was just being kind, but sitting in that room, I understood something for the first time. She hadn't been comforting me. She had been preparing me. Still waters run deep. Don't let anyone tell you the quiet ones lose. She wasn't talking about strength. She was talking about strategy. She was talking about patience as a form of power, so specific and so quiet that no one sees it building until it's already built.
I folded the graduation program and placed it inside a plain manila envelope. The envelope went into a small wooden box I had kept since childhood, a box Iris had given me when I was 9. Pale wood, a simple latch, nothing remarkable to look at. That box would travel with me for the next decade. What was already inside that wooden box, sitting beneath the graduation program, is the reason I wanted to tell this story. And it has nothing to do with revenge, and everything to do with what my grandmother understood about time. I started my job in September. I worked in financial planning at a mid-sized firm in Columbus. I was good at it. Not in a flashy way, in the way that quietly valuable things tend to be good. Consistently, precisely, without needing anyone to announce it. Within 2 years, I had a client roster that made my direct supervisor pay attention. Within 4, I had been promoted twice. Within 6, I was being approached by a competing firm offering partnership. I did not call home to share any of this. I'm not sure my parents would have known what to do with it if I had. Wade had, by this point, tried 2 businesses, one of which my father had quietly funded to the tune of about $40,000. Both had closed. There was no announcement about that at the dinner table, just the same recalibration of hope and the same pivot to the next chapter of the story they needed Wade to be. Priscilla had married young, moved to Arizona, and found her own version of distance. We exchanged texts on birthdays, occasionally holidays, nothing more. By the time I was 31, my parents were in their mid-60s. Their financial situation had begun to show its actual shape. The house needed work, Gerald's health had started making itself known, and somewhere during those years, my parents had a private conversation about what their future looked like. In that conversation, Wade had apparently said that Lena had turned out fine, that she clearly didn't need anything from them, and that they could count on him. He had said it with the comfortable certainty of someone who has never once had to be counted on, and therefore does not understand the weight of the word. The shape of what they had decided. Wade would manage their affairs as they aged. Lena would be kept on the periphery, as she had always been. They never thought to question it. They made one logistical error in all of this, a significant one. They never changed the paperwork. Iris had given me the wooden box when I was 9. Inside it, a small note in her handwriting, that I had read so many times the fold lines were white. The note said only, "For when you need to know you weren't wrong." What I did not discover until I was 24 was that Iris's attorney had contacted me. Not my mother, me. Specifically, by name, by address, at an apartment my parents did not have. The attorney's name was Mr. Okafor. He explained that Iris had left a will, that within it, she had established a financial trust for me, built quietly over 15 years, through a series of small investments made in my name without mentioning it to anyone. She had opened it when I was 13. She had told no one. Not my mother, not Gerald, not Wade. The value of that trust at the time of her death was $237,000. Mr. Okafor also handed me a sealed envelope with my name on the outside in Iris's handwriting. Inside was a letter. One sentence from it I will give you because you need it to understand the rest. She wrote, "I watched you, Lena. I watched you for 20 years, and I put the money where I put my faith, in the quiet one." I placed that letter inside the wooden box, on top of the note from when I was 9, beneath the folder with my graduation program, and I latched the box closed. My mother found out about the trust approximately 4 months after the will was read. The response was not quiet. There were calls, there were accusations, there were words between my mother and me in a phone conversation that lasted 12 minutes before I ended it. My mother's central argument was that the money had been meant for the family, which is an argument that ignores what a will is and what a trust is and what Iris's handwriting looked like on the envelope with my name on it. I did not argue back. I said, "The trust is structured as Mr. Okafor described. That's the end of it." And I meant it. There was a silence on the other end that told me everything about how my mother had expected that conversation to go. She had expected me to apologize for receiving it. She had expected to make me feel that I had done something wrong by being someone my grandmother chose to believe in. I did not apologize. And then I did what I had always done. I said nothing more. I rebuilt my silence around me like a structure, and I kept living. That was in 2018. In the time that followed, I used a portion of the trust to make my first real estate investment. I watched it appreciate, I made 2 more, I continued at the firm. I built a life that was quiet and specific, and entirely my own. The call came on a Tuesday morning in October. I was at my desk. The number that came up was my father's cell. It was not my father's voice. It was Wade. He said, "Lena, Dad's in the hospital. It's his heart. Mom's here with me. We need you to come." I want to be precise about what happened inside me in that moment. It was not satisfaction. It was not the feeling of a scale balancing. It was something more complicated and more quiet than that. It was the feeling of having known, without knowing you knew, that a moment was coming, and then finding that you were not as ready for it as you thought. I said, "What hospital?" Wade told me. I wrote it down. I said I would be there. And then I went to my closet. I took down the wooden box. I opened it. I looked at what was inside. And beneath all of it, the one other thing I had placed in that box, a document I had requested from my attorney 8 months earlier, when I had begun to understand that certain things needed to be formally organized before they were needed. I held the document for a moment. Then I placed it back, closed the box, and put it in my bag. I drove to Columbus General. My father was in a room on the 3rd floor. He looked smaller than I remembered him. That always shocks you, even when you've prepared for it. My mother was in the chair beside him. She said, "You came." I said, "Yes." Wade was standing by the window. He said, "We're gonna need someone to start coordinating things, managing the situation." He said it to me, which told me everything about how the conversation where he had promised to handle it had recently been revised. What followed over the next 2 hours was a fairly complete picture of what my parents' financial and practical situation actually looked like. Wade had not been attentive to understanding what those affairs consisted of. The house needed a roof. The retirement account was thinner than either of my parents had been willing to say out loud. My mother said, "We just assumed you'd be fine, Lena. We thought you didn't need us the way the others did. That's why things were the way they were." She meant it as an explanation. What she had said was, "We chose to ignore you because it was convenient to believe you didn't need us." I opened my bag. I took out the wooden box. I removed the document, a notarized letter from my attorney establishing the terms under which I was prepared to assist with my parents' affairs going forward. Medical decisions would require my involvement. Financial ones would be reviewed. Wade was not named in any formal capacity. I placed it on the bedside table, where my father could see it. Gerald looked at me. He said, "Your grandmother always said you were the one who understood things." I said, "I know. She told me." Wade, in the months that followed, did something I did not fully anticipate. He called me once, not to argue, not to contest anything, but to say that he knew he had not been what he had promised to be, and that he was sorry for how things had been when we were young. He said it briefly and without performance. He said it once and didn't repeat it. I said, "I appreciate that." I didn't say more than that. What he had said was true and cost him something. What it didn't do was undo the flag football tournament. Some truths are acknowledged and then set down. That's all they can be. Priscilla called from Arizona 2 weeks after the hospital. She said, "I heard you came through for them." I said, "Yes." She said, "I'm glad." My mother did not apologize explicitly. I want to be truthful about that. What she did was start to call more regularly. The calls were different. Less weather, more actual question. Once, she asked me about Iris's letter. I told her I had it. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "She always knew what she was doing." I said, "Yes, she did." The warmth I needed in all of this did not come from any of them. It came from Mr. Okafor, Iris's attorney, who had been meticulous and kind from the first time I sat across from him, a 24-year-old who had just lost her grandmother and discovered that being believed in has a specific legal shape. He sent me a card when I completed the third real estate purchase, a plain card with a simple note. Iris would not be surprised. I have that card in the wooden box now. I live in Columbus still. My apartment has good light in the mornings. I have a practice that grew from the firm, now partially my own. The work is the kind that compounds quietly, year over year, the same way Iris's investments did, with patience and precision and the particular focus of someone who was taught early that no one was going to build this for her. My father is managing. Gerald is smaller now in person, but somehow more present. The way people sometimes become more present when they are reminded of the particular gift of not being gone yet. There is still coffee burning somewhere in their house. The smell hit me the last time I visited, in the same way it always had. Same dining room, same slight heaviness in the air. But I was not sitting at the table the same way. I was sitting at the head of it, because my father had asked me to. They called me the self-sufficient one. They called me the one who didn't need things. They called me the quiet one, the self-contained one. the one who was fine on her own. They meant it as a dismissal. They packaged it as a compliment to make the neglect more comfortable to carry. What they never understood was that the quality they were dismissing was not a limitation. It was the entire point. The stillness was not absence. It was accumulation. Every year I spent being overlooked was a year I spent understanding exactly what I was building and exactly why. Every time they turned toward Wade and away from me, I learned something specific about what loyalty actually looks like when it is not performed. Iris knew. She had watched. She had placed her money where her faith was. Still waters run deep. Don't let anyone tell you the quiet ones lose. She wasn't talking about survival. She was talking about this, about the woman I became, in the specific texture of her absence, because she had believed in me early and completely and had done something about it. Not loudly, just thoroughly, the way anything lasting gets done. I am not victorious. I want to be clear about that. I am tired in the way that walking through something leaves you tired, and I am still learning to understand what I lost alongside what I gained. There is grief that doesn't have a clean shape. But I am free, quietly, completely, in a way that feels like a room with the windows open after a long time closed. That is enough. It is more than enough.